I've determined that the most important leadership lessons are universal, timeless, and oftentimes delivered by the most unexpected messengers in the most unexpected way. My grandmother's name was Phillip Van Hooser, and we just called her Mammy. Now, Mammy was a country grandmother, and I mean by that she was born on a small western Kentucky farm in 1893. While still in her teens, she married a young farmer, his name Marion Van Hooser, my grandfather, and together they raised 7 children on a small family farm in western Kentucky in a small farming community named, wait for it, Farmersville, Kentucky. Now, my grandmother did not have an easy life. For example, she cooked on a wood stove till the day she died at age 81. She wore plain, handmade cotton dresses made by her own hands, and she protected those dresses by wearing handmade aprons, each of which had 2 pockets. The left-hand pocket, I remember it well, always, and I mean always, had a handkerchief. Because my grandmother believed that most of life's daily problems could be solved by having a hanky handy. In the right-hand pocket, well, my grandmother liked to keep a can of snuff. My grandmother loved to dip a little snuff now and again. And I love my grandmother. And I loved spending time with her whenever I could, just the 2 of us. There was one such occasion when I was about 5 or 6 years old that I was with my grandmother, just the 2 of us, in her kitchen as she made her daily batch of homemade biscuits from scratch. Now, my grandmother was a master. She did this for over 70 years. And she would take the most basic of ingredients, flour, baking powder, buttermilk, lard, lots and lots of lard. And she would combine those ingredients and knead that dough and roll that dough and cut those biscuits out and pop them into the wood stove. And minutes later, perfection. Perfection. And I had watched her do this many times, including on this particular day, but I never learned how to do it myself. Why? Because most of the time, I was talking. Talk. This may come as a big surprise to many of you in here, but I love to talk as much then as now. On this particular day, though, I remember that my grandmother had not said very much, probably couldn't get a word in edgewise. But I do remember that at one point she stopped and she pivoted and squared up with me. And as she wiped her hands, those flour-covered hands on her apron, she motioned for me to come closer. Come here, son, come here. Well, I was thrilled because this obviously meant that I was going to get my grandmother's undivided attention. So I went to her, and when I did, she reached out with those weathered hands, and she took hold of my little scrawny shoulders, and immediately I felt a downward pressure. And I realized that my grandmother was using me to brace herself as she got down on one knee. And in seconds, everything changed. Because all of a sudden, for the first time in my recollection, my grandmother and I were on the same level, eye to eye. Now, I was young. I couldn't have predicted what was going to happen next, but I did know enough to pay attention. This was different. This was special, and I want to remember this. And so I did. And because I did, I can share with you exactly what she said to me that day, these many years later. As she held my shoulders, as she looked deep into my eyes, my grandmother said, "Shut up!" Now, I wasn't expecting that. You see, my grandmother had never spoken to me that way before at all. And in fact, to be very honest, it frightened me. And as she was still holding my shoulders, I tried to wriggle away. But her grip tightened. And in fact, she drew me even closer to herself. And when she had me wrapped in that loving embrace and me totally immobilized, she whispered these words in my ear. She said, "Son, don't you realize that when you're talking, you can't learn anything? It's only when you're willing to shut up and listen to others that you might just learn something." That was more than 60 years ago. And now here I am, the old one. But you know, it's interesting. As I continue to work with business leaders, executive, business owners like yourselves, and I hear them on a day in, day out basis bemoan the fact that the employees, their followers, are unmotivated and disengaged, and they can't understand or appreciate why they act the way they do. Why, Phil, do they do what they do? It's on a regular occasion that I often think, I would like to wrap my arms around you and pull you close to myself and whisper into your ears that critical leadership lesson that my grandmother shared with me very early in my life. A leadership lesson that changed the way I lead and the way I live. Remember, when you're talking, you never learned anything. It's only when you're willing to shut up and listen to others, you might just learn something.